Welcome to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders, owners, and professionals are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Hear from industry experts on everything from marketing, leadership, financing, and more. Brought to you by HAYVN, a co-working space where you can connect, create, and get stuff done.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the HAYVN Hubcast. I'm your host, Nancy Sheed, and I am excited to be chatting with, learning from, and being inspired by Jessica Dodge. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much.
Jessica oversees the Connecticut Office of Innovation. One of her big success stories that she's affiliated with is the Connecticut Next program, where we've discussed on the podcast before. She's kind of at this interesting mix of, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica, sort of private-public partnership and encouraging innovation within the state of Connecticut. How else do you describe what you do?
Oh, gosh, it's a long-winded description. And you're right. The Office of Innovation is the most immediate and most recent iteration of all of the amazing work that had happened through CT Next and Connecticut Innovations and many before that even. So it's really this beautiful blend of the work that happens inside of entrepreneurship and startup activity, the venture capital space, and taking advantage of all that we have in our network of higher education in Connecticut, distilling all of that down into really 4 fundamental pillars. So we want to develop all that is around economic development for Connecticut startups, for the innovation economy here in our state. And we do that leveraging all that is rich in those resources that I mentioned by offering programming and initiatives to benefit them. So it's a really unique role. It is incredibly important for the state of Connecticut that we continue to support startups and scale-ups, continue to look at opportunities to de-risk the risks that they themselves are taking on, and continue to foster innovation and entrepreneurship in Connecticut. Our small businesses are incredibly important. And so we build programming and initiatives to service them so they can ultimately work, not to be too cliche about it, but smarter, not harder.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it feels like we've come a long, long way over the past, 5, 10, 20 years of the not bashing score, of course, but there are just so many different models for starting up and sophistication and innovation that goes on. Before we tease into that, I always like to go backwards a little bit and say, so Jess, when you were growing up, did you want to, were you thinking about running companies and, were you at the cash register building businesses, or what was motivating you when you were sort of figuring out, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I actually know what I want to be when I grow up yet. That's the awesome.
Me either.
Yeah. When I become a grown up, I think the most amazing thing about the work that I do is that I am constantly now uncovering new industries and new problems that entrepreneurs are solving that I didn't know existed. And I certainly, as a 8-9-year-old version of myself, would have never dreamed of. I wouldn't describe myself as terribly entrepreneurial, but I do really see the elements of intrapreneurial activity inside of my space. I've been fortunate enough to have amazing leadership in most of my career where when there was a hole professionally and I raised a hand to sort of squeeze in there, I'd be allowed to write my own job descriptions and evolve as needed. I love the customer service end of the work that we do. And I know customer service gives a little tweak to most, but it's the people. This is a group of individuals that are focused and mission oriented. And the idea that there's the helping them do the things that they know how to do best and taking the other stuff off their plate was an accident to fall into. It was in working for small companies for many years and just getting lucky with a job many years back at Connecticut Innovations that really introduced me to the space. And I fell in love with it, fell in love with the mission of servicing entrepreneurs, and haven't yet looked back.
Well, I love that. But a quick question in terms of, as you said, sort of not entrepreneurship, but yet it kind of sounds like you've been very adjacent to it. And I love that you've brought on the entrepreneurship. Did you ever actually work at a big company? Do you know what I mean? Like, did you ever do the corporate job? Like, I'm at the stage where we're like talking to our kids. I was like, I think everybody needs to do small company, startup, corporate company, and everybody has a place. I'm just curious, Or have you always sort of been focused on the entrepreneurship and the smaller business?
Dominantly the smaller and mid-sized business. I did work for a very large nonprofit, and so lots of learnings there too. In my journey, I really enjoyed working for the smaller and mid-sized companies because I found that I could do just what I said, find a hole and fill it. Not a knock on the big companies, tremendous amounts of innovation and evolution inside of lots of them as well, as I've come to know them in this role, certainly. It just was a better fit for me that it was smaller and medium sized. And I do think that that lens on it, that perspective on it for me has been really helpful in trying to outthink the needs of what some of my now customers, as these small and mid-sized companies, might need. And on the flip side to that, in looking at talent as one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about, workforce, the counterpoint to that, right? The really amazing top performing student, not just immediately put myself in that bucket, I'll be clear, but to look at some of these very credentialed people looking for opportunities to grow professionally and not feeling like the large companies are a right fit exactly for them either. So it's been dominantly smaller, and I've enjoyed that for myself. It's not a great fit for everybody, and I appreciate the bigger guys. They were just never really for me.
No, and I think you don't know that. You don't know what you don't know. You mentioned customer service getting, I don't know if you specifically said, a bad rap. But I feel like in this day and age, we want humans. We want people who hear us. We don't want canned answers. We don't want generic answers. And in the customer service you're doing, there's a whole lot of hand-holding. I mean, you say customer service. I would assume you're also, though, being an advisor and a parent and a godparent and I feel like all of those roles are ones that we're fitting into customer service in a different capacity than what we used to do. How does that feel for you as the person who's providing that service?
It is tremendously fulfilling. Even as recently as last week, have a number of different phone calls as we've launched some new initiatives back to back where those interested are signing up one-on-one to just have discussions, learn more about it. And you'll go back to back to back. And there's such a gradient in the way that people are looking at what they need, how I might be able to help them, where they're feeling like somebody perhaps hasn't given them the right sort of tools yet. And such tremendous appreciation for when they find out that the thing they needed already existed in many cases. The flip side to that is, right, there's always those that are so heartstrong on their vision and their baby because it's their startup and it literally in some cases is blood, sweat, and tears. And you cannot deny that that person has given it their all. And sometimes it's not going to be a good fit. And so there is a fair bit of letting down easy or finding better solutions. But I don't think that anybody in our space has ever 100% always picked the winners, so to speak, right? So it's really important to, in all of that, not dash hopes either. I don't know that many things that have since gone on in my 10 plus years to be successful, I would have on day one been like, winner. Right. So it's really the customer service, as I sort of said, I think the tendency is to go call center and, robocalls and the thing. I agree with you. It's so relationship oriented in my space. And I think that in saying I've worked dominantly with smaller companies, the biggest entity there is in the state, right? I'm part of the government now, part of the state representing the needs of small businesses. And even we have found ways to be very human about it, very approachable. We can always do more, but I'm really excited at the way that this sort of footprint that we're building in establishing support mechanisms for entrepreneurs is listening to what they need and sort of reacting very directly to them. I mean, that's customer service at its core right there. So it's really fun.
It is. And I'm going to say it. You don't say it because you work for the government. These are not necessarily words, actions, adjectives that we associate with government, right? So, I mean, and on top of innovation. So it's exciting to hear about the work you're doing. I should take a step back. You were talking about these new initiatives you have coming and working with people who are applying. Let's just assume people who are listening might not know exactly what, let's say, I know the day-to-day of your work is very different, but in general, you are deciding who has potential for you to support and move forward. That's a very simplified version. How do you describe it, or what is a typical sort of I won't say day, but like workflow for you when you're having companies come in or try and be part of, let's say, a partnership or a spotlight program?
Yeah. So in the day to day, so much of what I'm doing is really advocating for how really forward facing our work is.
Mm.
I would agree with you that most people don't think government and the immediate synonym is innovation. And we're looking to change that a lot. I think it's important to note that Connecticut was named the number 4 most innovative economy in the US.
Woohoo! Go Connecticut!
Right. Most people don't know that. We talk a lot about our, how well educated our people are. We're the number 4 most educated state in the country. Our rank for college readiness is number 1 in most surveys. We have tremendous patent activity and these really amazing core foundational blocks where it's actually surprising to me how I guess you see your own sort of scrapes and bruises, but here we are with all this beautiful data-driven objective review, and we are moving the needle. And so I think, yes, parts of it is conversations like this, ensuring that there is a better understanding of the potential that we have and the championing for the successes that we have and our peers do here in Connecticut. A lot of my work is really listening to the entrepreneurs. My goal is to develop and operate programming on behalf of Connecticut. And we don't do a good job of that if we're not listening to our customers directly. So I use the word entrepreneurship, and I think there is a little bit of that in this. If we're not doing our own market research, so to speak, if we're not doing customer reviews, if I can't articulate over time the value proposition by way of success metrics that we're collecting and tracking, we would have very little cause to suggest that this is working. And so it is a lot of listening on the front end, developing initiatives and programming for use by the entrepreneurs and the startups themselves, even the relationships with venture capitalists, angel investors, and the universities as well. They're incredibly important stakeholders to us. And engaging, obviously, the legislature and the governor's office to ensure that the priorities go all the way up through the spectrum. So very relationship focused. When the programs launch, obviously, we then look at the review, as you said, and other things to be able to account for activity and ensure that we're collecting data that makes sure we know if something's working or not. Because if it's not, we shouldn't be prioritizing it going forward, and vice versa. We should do more if it is.
And what the listening obviously has to be ongoing, but what a challenge, because I would think that some of the metrics by which you're measuring are changing almost maybe with every program you're rolling out, right? Like between AI or what's going on, or I can only imagine that you can't even have this, there can't be a cookie cutter approach to every program. It's got to be kind of like, okay, now how are we valuing it, or what's going on? Because there is no status quo anymore.
Yeah, you are so right. And yet sometimes it really simpler is better, right? This is fundamentally at its core economic development. We should be able to look at things like the job growth numbers that we've seen over the course of time, where our private sector job growth has returned to pre-pandemic numbers in Connecticut. That to me is a very obvious success metrics to indicate that there is an economic development swing that should be objectively optimistic. We're looking at our population growth, and there was a lot of discussion about whether or not that was fluky because of the pandemic, and it's not. It's continuing to trend positively. That's good for economic development as well. And then if we're looking specifically at the establishment of new business growth, Connecticut is really doing very well in that space. We are stronger growth metrics relative to our regional neighbors, as well as some of the other communities we would compare ourselves with as a benchmark across the state. So some of it is pretty on the nose for what you would expect across the board at the top level. And then program by program, we're not looking to get in the weeds where we don't need to be. I think the role that we play is by way of accountability to be able to, again, ensure that we are good stewards of the state of Connecticut's priorities and funding opportunities, and so that we can be sure that things are happening in the right way. But at the end of the day, things like the job growth, tracking mentorship and technical assistance hours, follow-on investment, those are pretty core growth metrics that we look at for entrepreneurs and startups using most of our programs, they tend to trend over time. There's going to be some specificity program by program, but most of those things we see take shape with the near-term activity, right? How many tushies do we have in chairs?
Right.
Balanced relative to the long-term activity, which tend to be those growth metrics and even more so those economic development metrics.
That's very helpful. And I appreciate you sharing some of the bigger trend items that you're tracking. We were chatting earlier, and your work before what you're doing now, you were a certified exit planning advisor, and now you're much more in the beginning stages. Can you talk a little bit about your experience for sort of seeing companies that were either in succession planning or exit strategies versus now, and how that experience impacted when you're talking to sort of new businesses and new entrepreneurs now?
Absolutely. It was not on purpose that my career became so cyclical. And it's really been a true pleasure to have serviced the needs of business owners at all levels inside of that. So I think when we're looking at the servicing of the entrepreneur, there is something kind of salacious and cool and flashy about the drive and the grit and the determination and the endless, it seems, energy to really keep going and to keep cranking. And that carries through in most cases to what is very true in the dedication that a senior individual who has been in business for many, many years might have. They're still driven and committed. The pace is slower. And so I really enjoyed and took a tremendous amount of value in seeing the inadvertent bookending of getting off the ground and starting and the things that are very different when you need to just make it happen, contrasted to the later stage work. But a lot of the stuff that those leaders care about is actually very much the same, right? The people that they work with, the product or the company that they've built is very much
why
their
behind
baby.
The why behind they did it,
right.
and the dream they had.
Absolutely. So similar and yet very different, but all of it has been really beneficial. And we're looking at ways to develop some of that into the work that I'll carry with me always in having that experience to ensure that the beginning to end, where there's commonality, the prep that we can do in the early days, hopefully make sure that the exit strategy that any company undergoes is eventually easier, more efficient, perhaps even more lucrative and therefore successful for them. There's a number of different wins and sort of going back and forth, as it were, and seeing the beginning and the succession planning and then bringing it back to the beginning again.
I love the full circle, or as you said, the cycle. You shared with us some amazing stats that we want to make sure to be sharing about, just how Connecticut is doing and where Connecticut is situated from an innovation standpoint. Where are startups in terms of what are the things you wish people who were thinking about starting up or who are thinking about applying knew in terms of just, I would say, the environment, right? Like, is it easier? Are there certain types of companies? I'm sure you've got stats of who's more successful versus who's not successful. What are sort of those top lines that people will need to know about, or you wish people knew more about?
I think that in general, the way that we look at things from the Office of Innovation standpoint is that there isn't really a one size fits all for picking the quote unquote winners, right? There's a lot of horses in this race. And if every venture capitalist had always known that there was exactly one formula to follow by which you would be successful, I think a lot of this would look very differently. There are plenty of times in which 10 years ago, I met a company and I'm shocked to find out that not only are they still kicking, but holy smokes, I was wrong in my first read and that they had all this potential and more, and they did the thing. I think a lot of that boils down to the team. And you'll probably, anybody who listens to this, who has either themselves been or has otherwise sort of hopes to start up a business, you'll hear probably 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10 that it's the people that make the company successful. And I would underscore that twice. Obviously there's a lot at the moment that is unpredictable, and we at the state are looking to be stable in whatever it is that we do launch and provide to our startups in an effort to continue to give them some continuity. I mentioned at the top a lot of the things that really correlate to what makes Connecticut special around living and working and visiting our state, right? We are cool, and I'm Not saying that as a total Connecticut geek myself, but I really do mean it. We have a lot of risk that our entrepreneurs are taking on. There's unpredictability coming in many layers of government right now. We are looking to really ensure that if there is the ability for an entrepreneur to just a teeny bit have their shoulders drop because somebody else is watching their six, somebody else is looking out for the relationship connection, the opportunity that's available. I want them to feel a sense of community. It's very important. There can be a lot of isolation when you're on your own at 1 a.m. and stuck thinking about the thing. And so those things are really important. So I would say good ideas and good businesses are not a one size fits all. If you really believe in something and there is evidence to suggest that it is working, the ability to dust yourself off and keep going, golly, those entrepreneurs and the CEOs and founders are just tremendous. I think that we do see a lot in the way of innovation in advanced industries in Connecticut. Manufacturing is always going to be very significant for us. We are seeing a tremendous amount of growth in quantum and AI as well as biotechnology, and have a lot that we are working around emboldening more, pushing the limits in those spaces in particularly. And I don't just mean quantum and AI more specifically as an industry on its own.
Right.
I think what we're talking about when we talk about AI is really the ability for other companies and other traditional industries, as you might describe them, to effectively leverage and utilize the skills within AI to do more conceivably efficiently and at scale. So there's a lot there, but obviously those industries are at the forefront. And I myself, as well as my colleagues, we're learning a lot every day too, in the way to be able to stay one step ahead of servicing the needs of those tapping into those fields.
Yeah. And I think that was going back to like things are always changing. How do you stay in the advisor role or the connector role when so many things are changing? Well, we're excited to see you soon, depending on when you listen to this, at the next HAYVN Hatch in March, where you'll be a judge. But I know you've been a huge fan and supporter of HAYVN from the very beginning. So we thank you for that, for being part of the community. How are ways that the HAYVN community can support you or find out more about you or work with you in your role at the Office of Innovation?
Absolutely. You can, without a doubt, we would love to have you follow us on LinkedIn. The Connecticut Office of Innovation has a fairly new page listed there as we ourselves get going, but would love to have you follow us there so we can announce new programs and make sure that you are in the loop for anywhere we're going to be. In addition to that, we do have our website, which is ctnext.com. You can go there, and our menu obviously will have a number of different initiatives listed. We've just launched a couple things that I'll make mention of here where they're timely, but depending again on when it is that ears hit this, sort of cyclical, and we do expect that they'll happen on repeat for some time. A new initiative launched for economy partnerships. So looking for resources and others providing a service to benefit the startups and entrepreneurs. And then the secondary one that we've launched is our Innovation Spotlight, and that's actually for entrepreneurs themselves. So 2 cool initiatives to engage with right now, looking to launch some talent initiatives in the spring. So we'll be busy. We'll be really happy to have additional traffic on any of the sites, but mostly to hear from all of you with the contact tab that's up there too.
Awesome. We'll include all those in the links. And I am not worried about you just sitting at your desk twiddling your thumbs. That is not a concern given all that you're doing and how lucky we are in Connecticut to have you in your role. Thank you again for your time, for your insights. We could do this all day, and we'll see you at the HAYVN Hatch and just sort of see like entrepreneurship in action.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening to the HAYVN Hubcast. If you like what you hear, please give us a review, share, like, and make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you listen to.
Thanks for listening to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders and owners are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. HAYVN is a co-working space and virtual community located in the heart of Fairfield County, Connecticut. HAYVN is a hub for business owners and professionals to connect, create, and get stuff done. Find out more about the HAYVN community online at hayvn.com. That's HAYVN.com. HAYVN Hubcast is produced by Sound Advice Strategies.